Employee wellness has never been more important. The public health emergency placed extreme pressure on the mental and physical health of everyone, and it really scrambled the workplace. Employers and wellness providers have been working hard to determine how to help going forward. Hi, everyone. I'm David Williams, president of strategy consulting firm Health Business Group and host of the HealthBiz podcast, a weekly show where I interview top healthcare leaders about their lives and careers. My guest today is Neepa Patel. She's CEO of WellRight, a leading employee wellness company. I've gotten to know Neepa and her company over the past several months, and I'm excited to have her on the show. If you enjoy this episode, please press that like button and subscribe. Neepa, welcome to the HealthBiz podcast.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Now, it's a real pleasure. And, there's nothing better than wellness as far as I'm concerned. So it's a good conversation.
Yeah, it's easy to get behind, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, they say mom, apple pie, and Chevrolet, and wellness. Those are all the things that we like. Before we talk about wellness, let's talk about how you got to your current spot. I'd like to go all the way back and ask you about if there's any childhood influences that have stuck with you to this day.
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure there's any one singular moment, David, but I'm the daughter of immigrants, who came from India in the early 60s. And they're now thankfully healthy and in their mid 80s. And so one of the things I think I attribute to their health and happiness is they, we had a pretty simple lifestyle. They were vegetarian. We had a really strong family and friend community in Jacksonville, Florida, of all places, which is where I grew up. And, I think they just lived a very happy, healthy, hardworking lifestyle. And, frankly, it was pretty uneventful, right? It was not one sort of magic moment that drew me into healthcare. I worked at a couple of hospitals and saw, frankly, that there was a lot of inefficiency there. Thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then I ran into organic chemistry and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. But really loved math and economics and liked solving business problems. And so, ended up spending 25 years in healthcare as a result of that. So,
that's a pretty good formula, Neepa. Some of the people that I interview have some sort of trauma that occurred in their childhood, either to themselves or a family member. But I think it's totally fine to have like a happy and mellow childhood and then, do wellness. It's a good, I recommend it, and I wouldn't say you lost out on anything by not having too many
I don't
traumas.
think so. I spent 25 years on the business side of healthcare.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of, not very glamorous things in utilization management and thinking about health control. And, when presented with an opportunity to focus on health and wellness, I thought that was a really good thing to go after. That's what I spent 25 years trying to get to, right?
Yeah. No, that's good. So it sounds like you ran into organic chemistry. So it sounds like a pre-med or something along the way. When you ran into it, then which direction did you go after smacking into that?
Well, I was a bio and econ major, so I still really enjoyed the kind of the healthcare aspect, but really liked the solving business problems. And so went on from undergrad to get my master's in health administration and really focus on the healthcare industry and how I could put sort of some of that business problem solving stuff that I liked to the test.
And you talked about, spending 25 years or so on kind of the administrative side of things. What were some of those things? I saw, I recognized some of the acronyms on your resume: BCBS, AIM, IPG. What are all those about? Those are all the 3-letter acronyms, except I guess BCBS gets a 4th letter.
Yes, exactly. It's definitely the alphabet soup of healthcare, right? So I spent a lot of time on the payer side, spent some time on the provider side, sold a lot of services to payers and providers. And it was all really interesting and fun, and got to see, I spent, maybe 15 years on the payer side, and then thought I should spend some time on the provider side to see if it was any different. And it turns out it's not that different. It's just the other, it's just the other side of the dollar. And so, but learned a lot along the way, had some great mentors and leaders that I worked with who taught me a lot of different things, like, how to stand in front of a board of Blue Cross Blue Shield directors at the ripe
Yeah.
old age of 25 and tell them what they should be doing with their business strategy. And then, uh, some other gems like done beats perfect. So how to make decisions quickly when you've got enough information. So those kinds of things have really sort of stuck with me. But it's, spending 25 years on the healthcare side, I think has really helped me to understand some of the complexities there, uh, which we deal with every day here at WellRight also.
I asked you about your childhood influences, but it sounded like you had like a second childhood on the administrative side. That's like this everything I ever needed to learn. You learned not if not in kindergarten, then at least in the utilization management business or or whatever.
That's right.
I like Done Beats Perfect.
I love Done Beats Perfect. Right,
Yeah,
that's one of my favorites.
that is a good one. So what is your takeaway in terms of things like, utilization management, some of the various things that the payers do? One of the criticisms of U.S. healthcare, of course, is that one of the expenses is on the administrative side. Now, these organizations don't just throw money at it for no reason. Are they, they get what they pay for? What's the value?
Well, I think, frankly, I spent a lot of time on those kinds of issues. And I think really it's just about how do you make the system more efficient. And so you can direct resources to the people that really need it, right? So that's how I think about it. It's, there's a lot of unnecessary tests. There's a lot of unnecessary procedures. And so if you can really get to the crux of someone's issue and help them get to a healthier, happier, more engaged life in a quicker sort of way without wasting sort of valuable resources, time, money, etc., then I think their heart is in the right place. I think it makes a lot of sense.
And so, when you're talking about a lot of unnecessary procedures and so on, that is sort of like a payer perspective. You said on the provider side, it wasn't that much different. Do they also agree with that? Or is it that or that there's just a lot of unnecessary prior authorization, or what's the perspective on the provider
Yeah,
side?
I think it's interesting. I think at first they're not thrilled with it, right? It's like someone's watching them and telling them what to do. But I think when you really get down to, are you doing the right thing for the patient at the right time? And are they getting what they need? That's sort of hard to disagree with, right? And so it's just a matter of how you get there and how do you make it less obtrusive in the workflow, and how do you think about process improvement to get there. But I think the end goal of getting resources to the people that need it the most, it's hard for there to be disagreement on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think healthcare is expensive enough that from an overall standpoint, people could say if we could spend less and then actually be able to have resources for other things, that would be helpful.
That's
So
right. That's
it
right.
sounds good. But it also sounds like what you're doing now is more fun, if I may say so, in terms of wellness. Like wellness is good. There's no
It
argument on
is
that
fun.
one.
Like I said earlier, it's hard to be you know down about the wellness industry. It's really about
Yeah.
how do you help people get the resources they need? How do you help people, frankly, not have to interact with the healthcare system by leading happier and healthier and more engaged lives? And if they are engaging with the healthcare system, how do you help them navigate it in the best possible way? So I think it's a lot more fun. It's fun to, frankly, lead a company of people that are really enthusiastic about wellness and health, and we've uh, we've got a good team of 100 or so people, but everyone feels good about sort of what we're doing, which has been nice.
Sometimes when I'm surfing around the web and looking at different companies, I interact with a lot of healthcare companies in my job, in my life. You could sort of eyes glaze over as you go from one to the next. But I will say, if you look at the WellRight website, which I encourage you to do, you'll see that what Neepa's describing in terms of the happy people is reflected at least in the bios and the little essays there. So I do like it. I do see a difference. I'm interested on sort of when you think about wellness. I get the concept, but what does it mean from a company standpoint? What does it mean for WellRight to offer something? What do you offer, and who
Yeah,
buys
so
it?
we work with a lot of employers, different sizes, small, medium, big, some large healthcare companies, for example, that really are interested in giving their employees a set of tools that can help them become happier, more engaged employees. And part of the way that we do that is we offer a platform that an employer can customize, a person can customize to meet sort of the person where they're at. So, what's important to you? Are you interested in financial wellness? Are you interested in, in counting your steps? Are you interested in improving how much water you drink every day? Are you interested in mental health services? Are you interested in figuring out your purpose at work? What are you really interested in? And how do you have a platform and a set of resources and coaches, if you need them, to help you make changes in your life and create better habits? So it's actually pretty simple. So,
Yeah.
relative to our earlier conversation of other healthcare problems that I've tried to tackle at other companies I've worked with, this is pretty simple. It's a pretty simple concept.
So when employers are deciding how to spend money, they have different objectives in mind. A lot of times when there are things related to healthcare, they're saying, if I spend this dollar here, am I going to save $3 or $5 in healthcare
Yeah.
costs? There's other sorts of benefits that just offer in order to be competitive or to have a happy workplace. How do your customers think about making an investment and bringing on, a wellness program? Are they trying to make it pay off directly in cost savings? Do they see some other benefits from it, productivity or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit on all those, right, David? So I think there are some that kind of enter the discussion thinking, okay, I'm going to invest in a healthcare or wellness platform that's going to reduce my healthcare costs for my employees over time. And it certainly contributes to that discussion. But I think there's what we've found, particularly over the last couple of years, that there's sort of a shift in focus. How do I create more productivity in my workforce? How do I retain people? How do I engage people? How do I think about um, we spend so much of our lives at work. So how do I make the work experience better for my people and for my team members? And so I think the conversation is, we have a lot of conversations about ROI and value of investment. But I think the focus, the singular focus on healthcare cost reduction has broadened over time. And I think that's the right direction. I think it is more comprehensive than that.
I've seen some things in particular, that people struggle with, tobacco use and weight. Are those part of what you are doing, and how does that interact with what else is going on in the healthcare system? I'm thinking particularly these days, the whole approach to weight management has changed with some of these medications that are out there that have a bigger impact than they were before, but they're expensive and they also don't work by themselves unless they've got the proper supportive care around them.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, so I think David, you and I have been in healthcare for a long time. I think when these programs first started, right, I remember handing out pedometers when I worked at the
Yeah.
Blue Shield Association, and they were really cute and they were blue. And we had a program called Walking Works, and it was about counting your steps with that pedometer. And then tobacco cessation came along, and so I think those are certainly part of the program. But I think what we're seeing is that people want something more comprehensive. It's not just about those two dimensions. It's also not just about weight loss, but if you are entering into a weight loss journey, how do you keep that up? How do you create a habit? How do you maintain that? And so there's different tools and resources available. You're self-motivated and you kind of do that yourself. We also have coaches that can kind of help you and help track along with you. And so I think, what we try to do is present information and different ways to access that information so that you as an individual, if you're a visual learner, you can watch videos. If you like to talk to somebody, you talk to somebody. And so I think there's lots of different ways to kind of keep people engaged and motivated. That I think if you have a platform that can help you do that, there's a lot of good things that can come from that.
You're reminding me of the olden days of the pedometers and all that, which were fun to have, but it was kind of a weird device and people didn't necessarily have them. And the people who had them, they probably were already taking a lot of steps anyway if they were
That's
doing
right.
that. Now it's happened, it used to be very difficult. How do you get that in somebody's hands? How do you get them to use it? They would stop using it. Now everybody has a cell phone. And how has that changed what you're doing? So on the one hand, it solves the problem that everyone's got it. On the other hand, there's a lot of free wellness things available, not
Right.
associated with the employer. There's data and data security and privacy issues as well. How has that changed the game?
Well, I think it's a couple of different ways. So certainly with the cell phone and having a mobile app, there's just more accessibility to programs and services that you need. We have an interesting thing where a lot of our, you can, track your steps on your Apple Watch and it kind of uploads directly into our our platform. You can also text things back and forth. So if you've completed a challenge, or you've drank 64 ounces of water, you can enter that information and it uploads into our system. So I think, just it's created a lot more accessibility. I think what's unique about our program is that usually the employers have incentives or kind of ways to keep people engaged. And so I think that certainly helps, and it keeps people, again, it's really about motivation and changing habits. And so whatever hooks and anchors you can use to keep people on your platform, or tracking information, or at least thinking about it for a split second, like how am I going to change my behavior? I think that helps.
What are employers doing these days in terms of trying to get people to interact with their peers, their fellow employees? Do these tend to be sort of, each individualized program, or do you have contests, who's going to lose the most weight? Or I know when I was growing up, the wellness was, I had a neighbor down the street, and he struggled with weight a little bit. And so he used to do something with his coworkers where they would take a bet of who could lose the most weight. And so they'd do that bet one day, and the next day everybody would start bringing homemade cakes and things like that. Just, they didn't necessarily want to win and lose weight. They just wanted the other people to lose.
Right?
Yeah. Is that still state of the art?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly organizations that embrace that a little bit more. There's a lot of competitions. We do that at WellRight. We do that, not only competitive things like weight loss or how many steps you've taken. I think we did something in the month of January where it was about like walking outside, which was great for my employees that live in Florida. It wasn't so great for those of us that live in Chicago. So, there's friendly competition, but there's all those things that ways to leverage the platform about like community giving, right? And so we do a lot of work together at WellRight where we give back. We do things together where we go volunteer, but it's also a way to stitch together our hybrid workforce where we're all kind of working towards a particular thing together. It does create, particularly now since we've all sort of shifted to this hybrid situation, it's a way to stitch us all together, which is nice.
Great. You went where I was going to go next in terms of the impact of the pandemic, public health emergency, which is coming to an end shortly. But that's had, certainly a real disruption over the past 2 or 3 years, and then also presumably has changed the way, work goes kind of forever. How does that translate onto the wellness sphere? There's both, I would say, an element of what it's done to people's health and wellness, and then, of course, the structure of the workforce, which you were just describing in terms of, where people are physically located.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw certainly as a result of the pandemic, I'm sure it sort of started before that, but obviously the kinds of resources that people were looking for around mental health, 55% of healthcare workers say they're burned out, right? And so when you think about what resources an employer needs to bring to the table to help facilitate some of those difficult conversations and situations, a digital platform kind of helps you do that, right? Because not everyone wants to talk to their coworkers or colleagues about how they're feeling, but if there's a kind of an anonymous source on the end that can help you work through some of those, we certainly saw a spike in interest in a lot of those offerings. And then, I think certainly with the hybrid workforce and having people work remotely, again, it was just another tool to help people feel like they were part of a community and feel like that they were all connected in some ways. And so that's going to continue. And then I think, the other thing we were able to do is really push out information. So as you know, information was changing daily on what vaccines were important and how you should be thinking about bringing people back to work. And a lot of our employer customers were asking us for information and how do you get that information out to your employees. And so it's a good communication tool as well.
So employees, certainly don't exist completely on their own islands. They're a member of the overall workforce. And then especially when they're working from home, you've got the whole family as well. And the pandemic was particularly difficult on people that were already isolated or those that were supposed to be in school and were at home and so on. How to what extent do employers think about the broader family when they consider wellness? And has that changed as a result of this, work from home on the overall impact of the pandemic?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily changed, but, one of the things that we do is we include spouses and dependents kind of in our program. Because frankly, we talked about challenges with your coworkers. Sometimes it's equally important to have a kind of family challenge around certain things, right? And our platform is pretty broad in terms of the kinds of wellness programs that we include. So it may be a financial wellness thing. It may be, simple things like, did you make your bed and that makes you feel better in the morning?
Yeah.
Kinds of things, right? And so I think including the family and aspects of wellness is super important. And it just speaks to how do you keep people motivated and how do you keep people on a track to change behavior and create new habits. So I think having that social, emotional support system is super important.
Yeah, I make the bed every morning, and I was trying to figure out why do I actually do it, and maybe it
I
does
think it
make
makes
me
you
feel
feel like you
better.
accomplished something, David.
Yeah,
I think that's the point, right? Yeah.
At least I got something done, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Check that off the list. And you're
that's good. So I don't see a crystal ball on your desk, but I'm wondering if you are able to peer into the future and talk about the future of wellness.
I think the future of wellness, look, I think we talked about it a little bit. Thinking about wellness more broadly is going to continue to be a trend. And so I think what we're hearing a lot from our clients and what we're focused on is, how do you think about, again, going back to the fact that you spend so much of your time at work, how do you think about making resources available to your employees? How do you think about the broad spectrum of wellness? And so holistic wellness, I think, is going to become even more important. So we're not seeing RFPs that are singularly focused on physical well-being.
Yeah.
Or things like that, or nutrition, right? There is a broader scope, and I think there's a recognition that there's a lot of dimensions that contribute to how someone feels, how you feel productive, how you feel happy, how you feel engaged, and so I expect that trend to continue. And then I think, from a technical standpoint, just making those programs more easily accessible and digestible. Our attention spans, I think, have shrunk, right?
Yeah.
And so no one wants to watch a 15-minute video. Like, I think if you can get the gist of something in 3 minutes or less, you're in good shape. So
Right.
I think that's going to continue to change as well.
Great. So the final question I want to ask you is about any books that you've read and anything that you may recommend. And I know if you want, you could go back to the organic chemistry textbook and we could recommend that people read that with a perspective. But if there's anything else that you recommend, love to hear about it.
Sadly, I think I may have left that book in my parents' attic. So
Okay.
That is not something on my bookshelf. So I'm reading 2 books at the same time, which may speak to a little bit of how I work.
Yeah.
One is called The Crux. So I had our executive management team together last week, and The Crux is a book about how you form strategy, how you discuss strategy based on challenges as opposed to based on goals. And so I thought it would be an interesting way for us to think about as we're planning, our strategy over the next 18 to 24 months. What are some of the challenges we see and how do we think about addressing those challenges? So that was one book, which I read when I feel like it.
Yeah.
The other book I'm reading is a recommendation from my 12-year-old son, almost 12-year-old son, who was reading a book, a science fiction book, and none of his friends would read it. So
Okay.
he asked me if I would read it so he would have someone to talk to about it. So it's a book called Nixia, for anyone that's interested. It's a triad, really popular with the 12-year-old crowd. But so we are talking about that so we can have a little informal discussion. So that's what's in my Kindle these days, David.
Yeah, that sounds good, Neepa. I think those both sound very, very reasonable books. And I will say that on this podcast, a lot of the CEOs give me the same books that they've read. It's usually The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it's like probably one out of every 3 or 4 says that. So it's good to have some new ones on the list because neither one of those has been mentioned before. But
I'm surprised. I'm really shocked that Nixia wasn't mentioned before.
I don't know. I have to check it out. It may be again because people will see the podcast and will read it. Well, Neepa Patel, CEO of WellRight, thank you for joining me today on the HealthBiz podcast. I appreciate it.
Great talking to you.
You've been listening to the HealthBiz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.